Film noir, a phrase taken from French meaning dark film, was a genre prevalent in the 1940s, at a time where the world was either in the middle of World War II or recovering from it. This was a time where pessimism and disillusionment became increasingly present in the American psyche, and the public was looking to watch films that would fit that psyche. Film noir did just that. With its dark atmosphere and cold, cynical characters, it portrayed a gritty American world without the glamour that is introduced in many Hollywood films. The use of low-key lighting especially helped portray this dark atmosphere. One of the earlier examples of film noir was The Maltese Falcon, directed by John Huston and starring Humphrey Bogart and Mary Astor. Based on a book by Dashiell Hammett, the film follows private investigator Sam Spade, portrayed by Bogart, as he gets caught up with three criminals in the search for a priceless falcon statuette. Astor plays Bridget O'Shaughnessy, the femme fatale in the story and Spade's love interest. While film noir was mostly popular through the 40s, modern directors have made films using the codes and conventions of film noir, adding their own flair to the genre to give it a unique feeling. Directors Joel and Ethan Coen did just that when they made Fargo, the 1996 thriller set in their home state of Minnesota. This movie notably reverses the traditional gender roles of a film noir, starring Frances McDormand as Marge Gunderson, the chief of police in the small town of Brainerd. Gunderson investigates a roadside murder caused by Carl Showalter and Gare Grimsrud, portrayed by Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare, who were hired by desperate car salesman Jerry Lundegaard, portrayed by William H. Macy, to kidnap his wife, portrayed by Kristen Rudrud, for ransom money. McDormand received the Academy Award for Best Actress, while the Coens received Best Screenplay. While these two films are similar in the sense that they both adhere to the genre codes and conventions of a film noir, they are extremely different in the way that they present gender roles with respect to their characters. As the two films are separated by a period of 55 years, one could expect gender roles within American society to have drastically changed, and this is shown not just in life, but on the silver screen. The actions displayed in The Maltese Falcon by both female and male characters are relatively unrealistic and demeaning compared to the roles demonstrated in Fargo, and it's important to look back on The Maltese Falcon as a product of its time. In this comparative study, we will discuss the extent to which the genre of film has changed with regards to the representation of male and female characters, looking at the differences in The Maltese Falcon and Fargo. Firstly, we can look at how the male characters of each story are similar and different from each other. The genre of film noir is centered around crime and corruption, and we can see this represented through the central male characters of each film, Spade and Lundegaard. Both of these characters are engaged in seedy business dealings with other criminals in order to advance their own well-being, whether it be for money or for love. However, the clear difference between the two characters is that Spade is portrayed as the protagonist of The Maltese Falcon, while Lundegaard is an antagonist in Fargo. The Maltese Falcon goes out of its way to demonstrate the sheer manliness, for lack of a better word to describe it, of Bogart's character, starting with the casting of Bogart himself. Although he stood at 5'8", Bogart wore risers in many of his films, giving the impression that Spade was towering over his co-stars. His clothing and mannerisms show Spade as strong, brave, and fearless, typical tropes of masculinity. The assortment of male characters in Fargo, from Lundegaard's cowardly actions and attitude, to Grimsrud's expressionless face in 5 O'Clock Shadow, to the greasy-haired weasel that is Showalter, to even the compulsive liar Mike Yanagita, share none of these stereotypical traits. Another difference in the way the characters act is the way they treat death. As men begin to die around Spade, including his partner Miles Archer, he seems to treat the events with relative indifference, simply calling it a tough break. Even when a man comes into Spade's office with bullet holes in him and dies on his couch, Spade does not lose his commanding demeanor and aggressive masculinity for a second. Meanwhile, in Fargo, when the murders begin to pile up, death is treated in a much more severe manner. We see how the murderous affairs of the criminals begin to affect Showalter and Lundegaard's sanity, resulting in a snowball effect and even more murders. When looking at the female characters of the two movies, their depictions are as different as night and day. To start, the contrast in the clothing and physical appearance of the main female characters in each film is striking. The Maltese Falcon depicts Miss O'Shaughnessy wearing elegant clothing and furs all the time, whereas Gunderson is usually wearing her police officer's uniform. The use of the male gaze is prominent in The Maltese Falcon, seen when Archer looks back at O'Shaughnessy at the start of the film. It's a prompt to the audience that O'Shaughnessy is to be seen as a love interest for Spade, and that will be the most important element of her character. In fact, women in The Maltese Falcon are only important with regards to their subservient roles to men. The only other main female character in the film is Effie, Spade's secretary, and we're going to take a look at a few snippets of Spade's conversation with her to demonstrate this.
You're invaluable, darling. Say, get my lawyer on phone, will you? All right, Precious, you better hit the hay and get a good night's rest. You sound all in. How's the coffee coming, Angel?
Most conversations between men and women in The Maltese Falcon are generally demeaning towards the woman in the scene. This attitude culminates in one of the final scenes, where Spade tells O'Shaughnessy, You'll never
understand me, but I'll try once and then give it up. When a man's partner's killed, he's supposed to do something about it.
Spade completely dismisses O'Shaughnessy's, and women in general's, ability to comprehend this so-called man's world. In contrast, Marge Gunderson lives in this world and fits right in. She is the breadwinner in her family and is heavily pregnant, but this does not seem to hinder her throughout Fargo, as she defies stereotypical feminine beauty standards shown in The Maltese Falcon. Along with her physical appearance, Gunderson displays elements of bravery and independence. Unlike O'Shaughnessy, who plays the role of the femme fatale and a love interest, Gunderson is in a happy, stable relationship with her husband, Norm. While she does end up meeting with Mike Yanagita for dinner, she does not share his romantic feelings and quickly rebuffs him. Marge also shows her independence as she questions Jerry Lundegaard at his office. Just as O'Shaughnessy asks strangely and lies compulsively under Spade's questioning, Lundegaard fills that role when Gunderson is interviewing him. The difference between these two interactions is that The Maltese Falcon shows Spade and O'Shaughnessy as a man and a woman, whereas Fargo emphasizes Gunderson and Lundegaard as a police officer and a criminal. That distinction is an important theme when looking at these two movies. Fargo portrays its characters as people first and foremost, whereas The Maltese Falcon emphasizes either masculinity or femininity of its characters. Take, for example, Joel Cairo, who dresses fancily, perfumes his business cards, and carries a small Colt 1908, emphasizing the femininity in his character. The movie also implies that he is homosexual through his dialogue with Mr. Gutman, and the original book flat out says it. All the criminals in Maltese Falcon are made to look more evil by their stereotypical representations. Gutman is a bloated, cigar-smoking rich fellow. Cairo is a foreigner and gay, two types of evil in the xenophobic atmosphere of the 1940s. And O'Shaughnessy is, of course, a woman. Compare that to the criminals in Fargo, who are less defined by stereotypical tropes and more by conniving actions within the film itself. Lundegaard is cowardly and a liar, and those traits are what stand out the most about his character, not his masculinity or femininity. Marge and Norm's physical descriptions do not define them. Their actions demonstrating a healthy, caring relationship do. This distinction between these two movies allows Fargo to have much more fleshed out characters than The Maltese Falcon. Overall, 55 years in between these two movies is enough time for the standards of the silver screen and of film noir to drastically change, and this is evidently shown when comparing The Maltese Falcon and Fargo. The roles of male and female characters have gone from fitting into a predetermined box to being fully developed people. While both films are regarded favorably by critics, it is hard to watch the older film without being overwhelmed by the misogynistic actions displayed. It's nice to see how a modern take on the film noir can utilize the genre codes and conventions that made it so successful in the 40s and apply contemporary standards for its characters.